Every industry has an unwritten rule book. In heavy equipment, that rule book says newer is better, warranties matter more than wrenches, and the fastest way to grow a dealership is to sell shiny machines with big price tags and bigger profit margins. For decades, that rule book worked. Dealers who followed it built empires around Caterpillar, John Deere, Komatsu, and Case, chasing late-model inventory backed by financing plans and factory-authorized service centers. Then, in a small shop tucked into the hills of southern Indiana, a man named Clinton Chitwood looked at that rulebook and quietly decided to ignore it. He didn't chase the newest machines. He went after the ones nobody else wanted. And that single decision would eventually turn a tiny used equipment lot into one of the most recognized names in the entire industry. To understand why Clinton made the choice he did, you have to understand where he came from. He grew up in Monroe County, Indiana, on land that had belonged to his family for generations, surrounded by the sounds and smells of diesel engines and hydraulic pumps. His father ran an excavating business, which meant heavy machinery wasn't some abstract interest picked up later in life. It was a family trade. Bulldozers, excavators, and tractors were as ordinary to young Clinton as bicycles were to other kids. But more importantly, he grew up watching his father treat those machines with the kind of respect that's become rare in modern business. Equipment wasn't something you traded in the moment it started showing its age. It was something you maintained, repaired, and kept running for as long as it had life left in it. That mindset would shape everything Clinton eventually built, even when it put him directly at odds with where the rest of the industry was heading. In 2004, Clinton started CNC Equipment. There was no dramatic launch, no investors writing checks, no 5-year plan to dominate the national market. It began the way thousands of small equipment businesses begin, buying used machines, fixing what needed fixing, and reselling them to local contractors, farmers, and small operators. On the surface, there was nothing special about it. Rural America is full of equipment yards just like the one Clinton was building. If nothing else had changed, CNC might have stayed exactly that, a modest regional operation known only to people within driving distance. But around 2008, Clinton made a decision that most people in the business would have called reckless. He started buying decommissioned military surplus vehicles. These weren't ordinary trade-ins. These were vehicles that had spent years, sometimes decades, in active service with the Army, the Marine Corps, or the National Guard before being retired and funneled into government surplus auctions. The path these machines traveled before reaching a private buyer was long. Once the military decided a vehicle was no longer needed, it first became available to other federal agencies, then to state and local governments, and only after that, if nobody claimed it, to the public. By the time a vehicle made it into Clinton's hands, it might have carried years of hard use, thick layers of grime, and a maintenance history that ranged from meticulously documented to a complete mystery. The variety was staggering. One auction lot might include a classic deuce-and-a-half cargo truck from the 1950s, a design so tough it earned a reputation for going almost anywhere. Another might turn up larger 5-ton trucks, military Humvees, engineering equipment generators, or specialized recovery vehicles. Some had never left American soil, spending their entire service life on domestic bases. Others had been overseas and back. Ages varied wildly, too, because the military didn't retire vehicles on a schedule tied to age. It retired them based on strict maintenance cycles, which meant a truck built decades earlier could still be roadworthy if it had been cared for properly. That created a strange contradiction that most buyers never noticed. A vehicle could look absolutely rough on the outside, covered in faded paint, dents, and worn upholstery, while hiding a drivetrain engineered to survive conditions most commercial trucks were never designed for: deserts, mountains, freezing cold, deep mud, combat zones. Military specifications don't leave much room for compromise, because a breakdown in the field can cost lives, not just money. That meant heavy-duty frames, simple mechanical systems, generous ground clearance, and parts designed to be swapped and repaired without a computer diagnostic tool anywhere in sight. But those same qualities that made them so tough also made them a hard sell to the average buyer. They were slow. They weren't comfortable. Driving one on public roads often required specialized knowledge most civilians simply didn't have. Most dealers looked at these trucks and saw a headache. Clinton looked at them and saw an opportunity that almost nobody else was willing to take seriously. With the right mechanical know-how, some serious fabrication skill, and a willingness to put in the hours, Clinton believed these overlooked machines could become something genuinely valuable. Reliable workhorses for people who needed equipment that would keep running long after modern machines would have thrown a code and shut down. Their rugged simplicity meant they could operate in remote places where computerized equipment might be nearly impossible to service. Instead of selling these trucks exactly as they rolled off government auction lots, CNC started rebuilding and customizing them from the ground up. Crew cab conversions to add seating, upgraded suspensions for comfort and control, custom fabrication to solve problems that had no off-the-shelf solution, steering modifications, fully restore mechanical systems. What came out the other end wasn't a surplus relic. It was a purpose-built machine ready for construction sites, ranches, emergency response, or remote job sites anywhere in the world. Most of that work happened right there in Indiana, inside Clinton's own shop, which meant he could solve problems that no supplier catalog had an answer for. Every successful build added another layer to CNC's growing reputation as a shop willing to take on the projects everyone else turned down. Looking back now, it's easy to assume this was an obvious winning strategy. At the time, it was anything but. The broader industry was racing in the opposite direction, toward machines loaded with electronics, emissions controls, and proprietary software that only the manufacturer could fully diagnose. Big manufacturers poured billions into that future. Independent dealers followed their lead, stocking late-model inventory backed by financing and factory warranties. Clinton went the other way entirely, betting on machines the rest of the industry considered obsolete. What he understood, whether from instinct or hard-earned experience, was that for a huge number of customers, especially the ones working far from a dealership or a sophisticated repair shop, simplicity was worth more than the latest technology. That single insight became the foundation for everything CNC would go on to build. Most people in sales are trained to close the deal. Clinton built his reputation doing the opposite, telling people exactly when to walk away. When CNC posted its first YouTube video back in October 2012, nobody could have predicted it would eventually become one of the most trusted channels in the entire heavy equipment world. There was no production crew, no scripted marketing pitch, no polish. Clinton simply turned on a camera and pointed it at the real work happening in his own shop. While most dealers were putting out glossy brochures and staged advertisements, Clinton did the opposite. He showed machines exactly as they arrived, rust, dents, leaks, and all. His videos weren't built for quick attention spans. Many ran well past 40 minutes. Viewers followed him through muddy auction lots, climbed into worn-out excavators with them, and watched engines get taken apart piece by piece. It didn't feel like advertising. It felt like an investigation. A fresh coat of paint hiding rust underneath, excess play in a bucket pen, hydraulic fluid weeping from a cylinder that shouldn't be leaking, mismatched welds on a frame that told a story the seller would rather keep quiet. To someone who knew what to look for, these were the difference between a smart purchase and a very expensive mistake. That willingness to point out real flaws, even on equipment CNC itself was trying to sell, became the channel signature. Sometimes Clinton walked entire auction lots without buying a single machine, explaining exactly why none of it was worth the money. Viewers picked up on something unusual happening here. This wasn't a man trying to convince them everything was a bargain. He was teaching people how to evaluate a machine the way an experienced buyer would, and often his advice cut against his own bottom line. If the math doesn't work, walk away. That same honesty carried into a much bigger problem plaguing the industry. As online equipment marketplaces exploded in popularity through the 2010s, so did fraud. Scammers built convincing fake dealership websites, stole photos from legitimate auction houses, copied real listings, and advertised machines they never actually owned. Buyers, sometimes located halfway across the country or even overseas, were talked into wiring large deposits, only to discover the equipment simply didn't exist. Losses ran into the tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars for some victims, and industry watchdogs repeatedly warned buyers about the growing sophistication of these scams. Clinton took that fight public. Video after video walked through fake dealer sites, suspicious pricing, stolen photographs, and manipulated inspection reports, arming his audience with the tools to spot a scam before it cost them a fortune. He pushed people to verify physical addresses, request serial numbers, and confirm ownership before ever sending a payment. In a strange way, by teaching people how to spot dishonest dealers, he made it that much easier for viewers to trust the ones who were actually legitimate, including his own company. What made CNC's rise even more remarkable was how little of it depended on traditional marketing tricks. There were no manufactured arguments, no exaggerated reactions, no promises that every single machine was a hidden gem. People kept coming back because they trusted what they were seeing, even when the truth wasn't flattering. While much of the manufacturing world drifted overseas and modern equipment became harder and harder for the average owner to fix, CNC leaned even harder into rebuilding what already existed. That decision ran directly against the current of an entire industry. Starting in the late 1990s and picking up speed through the 2000s, manufacturers poured resources into cleaner diesel engines, onboard computers, electronic controls, and complex emission systems designed to satisfy increasingly strict environmental standards. Machines got quieter, more powerful, and more efficient. They also got dramatically harder to repair, to the point where a serious mechanical issue often meant the machine had to go back to the manufacturer or an authorized dealer just to get diagnosed. CNC took the opposite approach entirely. Why scrap a machine that could be brought back to life? Equipment arrived from auctions, retiring fleets, government surplus sales, and private owners, then got torn down, inspected, repaired, modified, and rebuilt inside the Indiana shop. Welding, fabrication, precision machining, hydraulic repair, and custom steelwork all became part of the process, with Clinton treating every machine as its own unique problem rather than running it through some standardized checklist. One of the most valuable tools in the entire operation wasn't a massive excavator or an expensive crane. It was a CNC plasma table capable of cutting precise steel components straight from raw plate, paired with in-house welding and fabrication equipment that let the team manufacture brackets, structural reinforcements, and replacement parts that simply weren't available anywhere else anymore. That capability mattered enormously when working on older military trucks or discontinued equipment, where original parts had either vanished or become absurdly expensive. Keeping the work in-house wasn't just about efficiency. It was about control. Quality is far easier to maintain when the people doing the work are standing a few feet away rather than scattered across a network of third-party contractors. This philosophy came through most clearly in the military truck conversions that made CNC famous. Old Army cargo trucks that once hauled supplies across brutal terrain came out the other side as genuinely practical civilian work vehicles. Crew cab conversions for extra seating, air ride suspensions for comfort, custom steering setups for better maneuverability, and one-off fabrication, solving whatever problem a specific customer brought in. None of it came from a factory parts list. It was engineered by hand, inch by inch, inside a shop most of the industry had never heard of. Meanwhile, the rest of the heavy equipment world kept moving further in the opposite direction, toward electronic control modules, proprietary diagnostic software, and complex emissions technology tied to environmental standards. Those innovations genuinely improved emissions and efficiency, but they also changed the entire ownership experience, often requiring dealer-only tools and specially trained technicians just to fix a basic problem. That shift helped fuel the broader right-to-repair movement, with farmers, independent mechanics, and equipment owners arguing that buying a machine should include the practical ability to actually maintain it. Manufacturers, for their part, argued that restricting access protected safety systems and emissions compliance. That fight eventually made its way to lawmakers and courts, with companies like John Deere becoming lightning rods for the controversy. Clinton never joined the picket lines or testified before a committee. He simply kept building an alternative, one rebuilt machine at a time, proving through action that repairability wasn't a nostalgic idea. It was still a viable business. By the time CNC's YouTube audience had grown into the millions and inquiries were pouring in from customers well outside Indiana, the company had every ingredient needed for rapid national expansion: a modern facility, serious fabrication capability, and a marketing engine most companies would kill for. Instead, Clinton and his wife Bridget made a deliberate choice to slow down. Every new location, Clinton has explained, means more managers, more layers of oversight, and inevitably less control over quality. Decisions that used to happen across a workbench start happening in meetings instead, rather than franchising the model or opening satellite shops around the country. CNC kept nearly everything under one roof, preserving the exact consistency and hands-on craftsmanship that had built its reputation in the first place. That reputation, and the international customer base that came with it, grew because buyers in remote parts of the world, from the Australian outback to rural Alaska to isolated regions of Africa, needed machines that could be fixed with basic hand tools instead of proprietary software nobody nearby had access to. In places where the nearest dealer might be hundreds of miles away, a rugged, mechanically simple engine was worth more than any amount of cutting-edge technology. In the end, CNC equipment never staged a protest or lobbied a single lawmaker. It didn't need to. Clinton Chitwood simply built the alternative the industry said couldn't work, one honest video and one rebuilt machine at a time, and in doing so proved that in an industry obsessed with what's new, there was still enormous value in what refuses to quit.